Welcome to the 5th edition of the Global Festival of Oneness, organized by Indica Center for Moksha Studies. My name is Anuradha and I'm the host for today evening. Let me start with a prayer. Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. In today's weekend session, we are going to launch Kathirasan K's book, 40 Steps to Liberation, a commentary on Adi Shankara's Sadhana Panchakam and key verses of the principal Upanishads. The book is published by Anvil Press and is available on Padhega India and Amazon India. Before we get to the launch, let me introduce today's guests. We're very pleased to have with us Nagaraj Paturi ji, Dr. Nagaraj Paturi, Dean, Senior Director and Chief Curator of Indica. Dr. Paturi is seriously committed to the transmission of Vedic sciences to the present generation. Dr. Paturi is a distinguished professor, curriculum designer, executive committee member, Board of Studies, MIT School of Vedic Sciences, member, Board of Studies, Kavi Kulaguru Kalidasa University, and Rashtram School of Public Leadership. He is also the editor-in-chief of International Journals of Studies in Public Leadership and is a member of the advisory council of Veda Vijnana Shodha Samsthana. He has over 50 publications and 60 conference papers to his credit. Welcome, Dr. Nagaraj. Our next guest is Nitin Sridharji, and Nitinji is the director and chief curator of Indica Center for Moksha Studies, formerly called Advaita Academy, and he is also dedicated to the dissemination of Advaita Vedanta. He has authored 6 books on various aspects of Hindu culture and practice. His first book, Musings on Hinduism, provided an overview of various aspects of Hindu philosophy and society. His most popular book is Menstruation Across Cultures, a Historical Perspective, which examines menstruation notions and practices in different cultures. His upcoming book is a commentary on the opening verses of the Manusmriti. He teaches courses on Hinduism for Indica, and he has been leading the Festival of Oneness for some years now. Welcome, Nitinji. And finally, we have the author himself, Dr. Kathirasan K, who had his tutelage with Swami Satprakashananda Saraswati, who is the disciple of Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He studied the subject of Advaita Vedanta under his guru for several years before beginning to teach this knowledge to serious seekers. He is also the author of the Advaita Vedanta of Shiva Samhita and has several books on secular mindfulness. He holds a PhD in yoga philosophy and meditation and has an MBA. Kathirasan ji is also the founder of 2 successful companies and has dedicated over 25 years to impactful community service. He has been instrumental in training multiple batches of Hinduism teachers and counselors in Singapore. Additionally, he showcases his musical talents as a member of the Vedanta-inspired extreme metal band Rudra. He was born in Singapore and he has been living there all his life. Welcome, Kathirasan ji. So we will now move on to the main event of the day, which is the launch of the book. So I request all the guests to please show the book, and we can come on the gallery mode so that we can all display the book.
Srinivas, can you put on the gallery mode?
Yes, it is already on gallery mode.
Okay.
So here is the book, 40 Steps to Liberation, a commentary on Adi Shankara's Sadhana Panchakam by Kathirasan K. Okay. So you've all seen the book, and I now request Dr. Paturi to say a few words about the book and the author. Paturi ji.
Namaste. Very glad to have back Kathirasan ji. We had him during our seminar on Vedic mindfulness, which we organized at IGNCA Delhi. And in fact, we started our conferences, seminars, and symposiums with that event only. And as a Vedic mindfulness coach, I knew him at that time. And then itself, I realized that he was very deep into the Hatha Yoga Advaita relation studies rigorously. And gradually, I understood more about him. And now, this book is on Advaita Vedanta, in which he comes out as the Shishya of Satprakashananda Saraswati of Malaysia. And the book throughout talks about the requirement of a proper guru. At every step, the author keeps telling you that this, just as many medicine pamphlets have, this book is not substitute for a medicine and all that. He keeps on saying that this book is not a substitute for a guru. Please have your own guru at every step. And this book is, in fact, not two books. It's not a single book. One of the books inside the volume is about Sadhana Panchakam and the commentary, translation and commentary on Sadhana Panchakam, a very small work by Adi Shankara, by Kathirasan himself. And the remaining part of the book, which is actually called Appendix, is a second book, I should say, a book of excerpts from main Upanishads. And Sadhana Panchakam itself has been, for people like me into Advaita Vedanta tutelage, this was from the childhood. It was always ringing from the elders. All the lines in the, it is a Shardula Vikridita meter that is used. Na 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 na. And most of the long endings here, they end in tam, which is the verb for may it be done. The meaning is may it be done. May it be done, may this be done, may this be done, and so on and so forth. And Vedam Nityam Adhiyatam, where it Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam, it begins with that. And an elderly woman in my childhood used to just barge into my house and start these lines, and this used to go on, and we used to take it by heart from such elders. So that very small work, 5 verses, have 40 action suggestions, instructions. And this book divides it into 3 parts, from 1 to 2 into the first part, the Pravritti Dharma. And from there up to the 11, 3 to 11, it comes under Karma Yoga. And from 12 to remaining, it comes under Nivritti Dharma. You can see that Nivritti Dharma part is the longest of all. And this classification is ingenuity of Kathirasan only. This is actually, that is not done by the original Sadhana Panchakam shlokas. So that beautiful way of classification, and inside the commentary, if you see, most of the concepts, the titles also come from modern lingo, lingo that is catchy for the contemporary generation. It is so it's that way. It is very different from the traditional bhashyas. So Kathirasan as a person who can connect well with the contemporary generation has brought the Sadhana Panchakam to the catching level of the people. He says that it is meant for mumukshu, a liberation seeker. But one of the opinion givers, Sangeeta Menanji, has said that it is useful not only for mumukshu, it is also for jignasus. So even jignasus may read this, and jignasu after reading can become a mumukshu. And after becoming a mumukshu, they can again read the book. as a mumukshu. So I, unlike Kathirasan ji, I recommend this book to Jignasus also. The market expands, and the Jignasus can then become mumukshus, and then they will become the target audience as targeted by the author. And his recommendation is to seek a guru while keeping the book in hand. Go in search of a guru. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paturi, for saying these beautiful words about the book. I would now request Nitin ji to say something about the book and the author.
Thank you, Anuradha ji. The Sadhana Panchakam itself is a very beautiful composition of Adi Shankaracharya, and the present edition is a very comprehensive, concise, very easily explained, very logically and systematically presented exposition on this wonderful text. I remember my first encounter with the text of Sadhana Panchakam happened almost a decade back, I think, when I was searching for a text, searching for a writing of Shankaracharya Bhagavadpada on something which is practical, his teachings which are practical. I mean, there is one is the Bhashya and other things which gives conceptual clarity. But once you have sufficient exposure, the next question is, where should I go? What should I do? So that is the more important, relevant question for a Vedanta sadhaka particularly, but for any person, because that is more personalized question. That what should I do now? Knowing that there is moksha is one thing, but what should I do to proceed? So when I was doing this research, I came across this Sadhana Panchakam, which starts with Vedo Adiyatam. I just forgot the exact word, that you should start by the Adhyayana of the Veda and the Karmanusthana of what the Veda tells. So this is a very, very practical instruction, and it was very appealing to me. And so when you approached, I am very happy to be one of the earlier readers of this book, even before its publication. And when you approached me with request to read the book and give my feedback, I was very happy. Firstly, because I have been great admirer of Kathirasan ji. After reading his earlier book, The Advaita Vedanta of Shiva Samhita, another excellent book, something that I have suggested for many people I know that to read that book, because it is another wonderful commentary on Shiva Samhita, popularly known for Hatha Yoga. So I was sure that this book would be very well, and it was not at all disappointing. In fact, it was very encouraging, and I really loved reading the book. As Nagaraji rightly pointed out, all the key practices of the Sadhana Panchakam, the 40 practices that the Shankaracharya Bhagavadpada has presented, have been elaborated in a very comprehensive but also concise and in a very easy to understand manner. So this is, I think, one of the very important features of this commentary, that it has width, it has depth, and it is also easy to read. Sometimes we see that some authors, there is great width but there is no depth, but there is great depth, there is no width, or sometimes both are there but it is completely, sometimes it's very difficult to comprehend for a normal author. So as I was mentioning just a while before, this is a kind of a semi-academic work, that is what I call, because it will be appealing to both the academic audience, it will be appealing to very common enthusiasts, it will be appealing to the mumukshus and the jignasus. So it is a very comprehensive book in the sense that it is appealing to all the kind of audience. And I must say that personally the style adopted reminds me kind of Sri Madhusudana Saraswati's style in Gudhartha Deepika as commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So particularly the sense it reminded me is that Kathirasan brings in perspective from all the, across the Hindu textual landscape, not just limited to this verse by verse, just an explanation. He brings in a lot of perspective and he defines all the key ideas, all the key definitions, and in a very simple manner. So this was again another appealing to me. And what was also striking to me, this Nagaraj ji also pointed out, the book structure, division into pravritti dharma and nivritti dharma. I think this is a very important way to present it. I think the most best way to present the Vedantic idea, because this structure provides a systematic overview of the Vedantic roadmap to moksha. Not as a Vedanta as abstract idea, but Vedanta as a proper sadhana mode. What are the steps? Where do we begin? Where we stand? It helps to evaluate. So, in fact, this is a structure I have adopted in my own book on Ishavasya Upanishad in the second part of the book to give the vision of the Vedanta. And the second part of the book, I think, is as important as the first part, the appendix, which contains the key verses of Principal Upanishads. So I'm glad Kathirasan ji included this. But even otherwise, throughout the book, there is great importance placed on the Shabda Pramana and with relevant references everywhere. And this is something I think a very important feature of the book and something which I really appreciate, because many modern books, in order to modern authors, in order to make the teaching simplified, they often make it anchorless. So for me, that is a no-no. So, but this book is full of making the teachings anchored in the Vedanta tradition, in the Hindu Shastra tradition. So I really appreciate this aspect as well. So I think I would simply end my short comment. I think it was not short at all. with a comment that this is a very handy volume, a must-read volume for all, for the mumukshus, for the jignasus, for even for somebody who has no idea about Vedanta also. They may need one or two readings. That is fine, I think. I think even the second appendix with all the key verses from Upanishads, they also act in a way to provide a overview and an introduction, a gateway into the world of Upanishads, the landscape of Upanishads. So this is a book for all, and I seriously recommend it. And I thank Kathirasan ji for writing this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitinji, for supporting the book at the very initial stage and now giving it a platform by explaining to all the readers what it comprises of. Thank you so much. So after this, we will now go back to the author himself and ask him about his journey as a student of Advaita Vedanta and about the book itself. Welcome, Kathirasan ji.
Namaste.
My first question to you is, of course, congratulations on the book, and it seems to have won a lot of hearts with the readers. The first question that I wanted to ask you is, please tell us something about your journey as a Advaita Vedanta student and teacher.
Thank you, Anna, for that question. Before I answer the question, I would like to thank Nitinji and Dr. Nagaraj for their very kind words. It's really very humbling just listening to your understanding and appreciation for the work. I really thank you wholeheartedly for that. Now, responding to the question, Anu, so I don't believe that we encounter philosophy. We find some meaning in a philosophy. So, I mean, to call Advaita Vedanta philosophy is also a limitation in itself, to be honest. So I did not encounter Advaita Vedanta and then take it on as a philosophy, but rather I was trying to look for an answer to life's questions. I had a lot of existential questions that returned to what is the purpose of life? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing these prayers? Why am I engaged in rituals? All of these questions come up being born in a Vaidika family or a Hindu family. So then the question came up a little later in my early 20s about what is the purpose of life, etc. And that led me to the quest of understanding different, spiritual teachings, etc. And what really resonated with me or connected with my disposition and personality was the teaching of Advaita Vedanta. Those of you who are not familiar with the term, Advaita means non-dualism. Vedanta means the teaching from the Upanishads. So it is a non-dualistic teachings from the Upanishads. That's what Advaita Vedanta is. Then I encountered Advaita Vedanta, which satisfied me by answering very, very critical questions. And this was in 1994, 95. And after that, I learned from my teacher, Swami Satprakashananda Saraswati ji. I learned with him for several years, learning this wisdom which comes from Upanishads and through the very important teacher, Shankara, who is the author of Sadhana Panchakam, this particular text that we are talking about today. And after learning, then I started to teach this as well, because I realized teaching this is also learning. As I taught, I understood the text better. As I talk about it, as I share, as I analyze, I learn more. So I realized that teaching also had a very great value. But I never saw myself as a teacher, because I consider myself a lifelong student of this particular topic. And I only become a teacher when someone asks a question. And when after answering the question, I let go of the hat of the teacher. I don't see myself as a teacher at all, though I taught people who came to me with questions. But apart from that, I realized that when I learned this from my teacher, it impacted my whole worldview. Now, that's a very important point I need to mention, because it changed everything. It was a transformation, and it continues to transform. That's the beauty of this particular, what I call wisdom. It continues to transform. It continues to impact the way I see the world, I see myself, etc. But primarily, it's all about the self. That is the subject matter of Advaita Vedanta. And that impact has been felt by me in my professional life, personal life, my teaching, as well as my artistic pursuits. It has pervaded every part of my life, so much so that I feel like I'm just doing one thing. As what the Advaita teaching itself says, we are just one being playing multiple roles. And that's exactly how I see myself and my relationship with the world. So this is basically the response to your question.
Thank you. The next question that I want to ask is about the book itself. This book is supposed to be a collection of your lecture series on Sadhana Panchakam. How did you decide to teach this text to somebody who must have come and asked you to teach you something or asked you with a question? What made you choose this text?
Interestingly, these were the first texts I learned from my teacher. So my teacher taught this as the first text for me to understand and appreciate the knowledge of the self. And later, much later, when a group of people approached me to wanting to learn Vedanta, I thought which text would be a good one. So I chose this text, but I had a reason for choosing this text. And the first thing that I would like to cite is that this particular text has a linear pedagogy. Now, what linear means, it's like successive pedagogy. You do one particular action or a particular spiritual practice, which is called sadhana. All right. Now, I use the word sadhana, it means spiritual practice. One sadhana, and then you move to the next sadhana, and then next. So it's successive and linear. So I believe that as a human being, one of the ways that we learn effectively is when we have a structure, when it's organized. So Sadhana Panchakam's teachings are organized in a way that it is linear. So it tells you start with 1, and then by the time you end at 40, you are liberated, you are free, existential freedom, which is called moksha or mukti, kaivalya. So that's one reason why I chose that text. The second reason I chose this text was, you see, in the Vedantic tradition, there is a very important method of knowing the self. Many of you may already know this, but I'm going to say it, which is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Shravana means listening to the teachings. Manana means analyzing, all right, the teachings. Nididhyasana is assimilating, embodying the teachings. So these are the 3 steps that someone takes to know and become liberated. So this particular text kind of brought a lot of light into the 3rd stage, which is called Nididhyasana, which is embodying the knowledge. a lot of times, even in the commentarial works of Adi Shankara, you don't find a very exhaustive, what I call presentation of nididhyasana, which is embodiment. It does not come out. But in this text, half of the sadhanas are actually focusing on nididhyasana. That was the beauty. So therefore, it is very helpful for any seeker who wants to really embody this knowledge. So therefore, there's a second reason that I decided to choose this particular text. Then the third reason is that there is a lot of times when people, during the early days in the 90s, when I was, wanting to know this knowledge, wanting to find answers, I would go to people, I would meet Swamijis who visited Singapore. I would talk to other people in satsanga, and I would always ask them, how to attain this freedom. And they would always tell me, find a guru. Right? That's a very common response that you would still hear. But the very interesting thing is, in the sadhana panchakam, the searching for a guru is the 13th sadhana. It's not the first sadhana. So when you approach someone will tell you, look for a guru, which appears like that's the first sadhana to undertake. But if you look at the text, it is the 13th sadhana, which is Satvidvan Upasripyatam. Shankara says, which basically means, may you seek a teacher to know the truth. And this is a very, very interesting point. Why? Because this tells us that before you even seek a teacher, you should have accomplished the prior 12 sadhanas. Can you see that? Now, this emphasis on preparation, that means before you even approach a teacher, the question whether am I ready to even approach? Am I ready to even seek? Am I ready? Is my mind ready to even to listen to this knowledge? So this text answers the question. So if anyone is very keen to know what is it that I need to do even before I seek a guru or before I seek an acharya, Sadhana Panchakam gives you 12 sadhanas that you can that you could undertake before you actually approach a teacher. And that's the last reason why I decided to teach this text. Yeah.
Would this text be considered do seekers study this text at the beginning of their Vedanta journey, or is it like an advanced text? How would you classify a book like this, a text like this?
It's very, I know people say that this is a very basic text. This is a very advanced text. Even sometimes I also use this lingo. But I think whether a text is basic or advanced depends on how advanced a seeker we are. Because we are looking for answers for questions. And every text may answer that question in a different way, right? So that is one. Like, for example, when I first studied this text in late 1990s, I saw it in a particular way. When I started to teach this text much later, I saw more. And when I started to edit this manuscript, I saw more. And 10 years later, maybe I will see more. When I say I see more, I want to really qualify that. When I say I see more, it just deepens. That's the difference. It is not that we see more things. There's nothing more than Brahman is the self, is the Atma. There is nothing more actually. But just that particular appreciation of the subject of the self being Brahman or Atma being Brahman, it just deepens, and it gets, you tend to embody it in very many different ways as you live, in our lives. So I would say that Sadhana Panchakam would be basic if you think that it is basic. It can become very advanced if you really go through, each of the sadhanas and dig deeper and deeper and deeper. It can also become a very deep text. So it all depends on the lenses through which and what our prior knowledge that actually allows us to see and acknowledge whether a text is basic or advanced. So this basic and advanced question is actually a scholarly question. This basic and advanced categorization have no value for the seeker, to be honest. For the seeker, we only want answers to the questions. That's all we want. You see, when I'm thirsty, I only want water. It's the scientists who will analyze what is the nature of the water, what is the molecular structure, and all of that. That's the job of the scientist, the scholar. But for the one who is thirsty, he or she just wants to drink water. So this basic advanced categorization, yes, may appeal to scholarship. But for a seeker, it has no value at all, as long as I find answers to my questions.
You had an interesting point. You said that the text actually asks the seeker to seek a guru only the 13th sadhana. But does our modern lifestyle allow us to practice the remaining previous 12 practices? I mean, do we have enough bandwidth to know them? How does a seeker get to know these?
No, that's the purpose of the comment. That's the reason why I decided to, engage in getting this book, written and published, because it's possible. And the other thing is, Anu, you see, we need to acknowledge a very important point, which is this. The Vedanta texts were never written for the common man. It was almost all of them, even Shankara, when he writes, he's writing for a sannyasi. Those of you who don't know what a sannyasi means, it refers to a monk or a renunciate. So that was the target audience. That is the competent seeker in the eyes of the Vedantic tradition. The traditional position is Vedanta texts are for the sannyasis, the monks, right? Renunciates. So to answer that question would then mean that the way the landscape of contemporary seekers of Vedanta has radically changed in the last 120, 30 years. Now, I don't know how many people are in the webinar right now, but I believe 99% of you are not sannyasis. Okay, I think I can make that inference. Are not sannyasis. None of you here is probably a monk or a renunciate. I would say that. So you can see the landscape of the sadhakas, the landscape of the aspirants have changed. The texts have not changed. You see, the texts were always written for the sannyasi. So when a text is now commented on for the common man, it is the teacher carries a very unique burden, isn't it? The teacher then has to contextualize the teaching without losing its integrity. That means the traditional approach to knowing the self cannot be compromised. It cannot be compromised. There is only one way. Let's be honest. It may sound like I'm very rigid, but that is it. That the tradition is only one way. Through knowledge, you know the self. But the way and hows for the contemporary person has to be now contextualized. Now, why am I saying this? Let me give an example. You see, when I learned with my teacher, I had other, friends and fellow seekers who were sitting with me. You see, the teacher is teaching the text in the maybe 1.5 hours or 2 hours. We're listening to the teaching, and after the class is over, the people who attend that particular session will go back. One will go back. The spouse is angry. One goes back. The child is hungry. The other one goes back and realizes that there is a lot of work to be done at home because they have to do overtime. You see, when these people learn this knowledge, and when they after the end of the class, they face challenges in their lives, which is very different from the sannyasi. The sannyasi is a different type of challenge. Perhaps if at all there are challenges for a sannyasi, it's different. But for the common man, the challenges are different. He may have a spouse, parents, siblings, children, colleagues, bosses, staff, etc., employees. So you can see the challenges are coming from different directions. These challenges are not directly addressed by the text. You see the point now? So because these texts were meant for someone who's already ripe, like in the form of a sannyasi, who's ready to take this knowledge and completely pay attention to the teaching without any distraction. But that's not the case with, I think, most of the people who are attending this session today. I believe most of you are not sannyasis. So after this session, you're going back to your real life, which could be so many other challenges. So now the teaching has to be presented in a way that you use these challenges as part of the sadhana. It's a very important critical burden that the teacher carries. So therefore, we need to acknowledge this. If we don't address this, it creates a kind of dukkha. Now, what is this dukkha? Dukkha means suffering, all right, or distress. You see, what happens is we will then compartmentalize the seeking of the knowledge of the self as one pursuit, and anything outside it as something other than this pursuit. So what happens is we will learn all the virtues and values in the class and what the text says. When we go back to our life, we realize that we cannot practice it. We become angry, we become frustrated, we scold people, we hurt people, we through our thought, word, and deeds, we do all the things that create a lot of harm to people. All of that would happen. That's why you see people compartmentalize it. So when I attend the Vedanta class, I'm this self. but outside the class, I'm someone else. So then what happens is, what we see as a very important need is to integrate the two without losing the integrity of the tradition, of the method of teaching. Now, when that happens, that's when people would find that their real, what I call practice ground for the sadhana is from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed. So the sadhanas are not something that you do, 30 minutes of prayer, puja, 30 minutes of meditation. No, it completely pervades and permeates your whole life, your waking life. So this is a very, very important thing that we need to recognize, which is the landscape of sadhakas have changed radically and tremendously. So therefore, this only happened in the last 120 years, at least from if you look at it, because we should be very lucky that this knowledge has come out of the forest, and we need to, of course, credit Swami Vivekananda for this, because he was one of the very important figures who brought this out of the forest and brought it to the mainstream. So people who are suffering, or people who are in distress in contemporary life, in modern life, can also have access to this knowledge. But yet, the teaching structure, the teaching methodology have to also be aligned to what the needs are for this particular audience. I hope I came out clear. Yeah.
Yes, that was very clear. In fact, that brings me to the next question, because the way your book is structured is that pretty much 1/3 of the book talks a lot about the practices that one needs to do to prepare one's mind. And I want to understand from you how you chose those practices. What were you targeting with your seekers? What were you looking to fix in their minds, if I can use that word, when you use these practices? And if you can share some of those practices which you insist that the students undergo.
Now, one of the things that I spent a lot of time, as you rightfully said, is the relational dimension of our life. You see, we are not islands. Like I remember spending some time in Rishikesh, in the Himalayan ranges, and I met a lot of great Mahatmas and sannyasis, ascetics in that tradition, and they all lived in a cave. So I even met someone who was in a cave. That's his whole life. He stays in the cave. He comes out for bhiksha, which is to beg for food, and then he goes back. That was not my life. My life is going to be that I need to relate with people. And so, what does that mean? It means that the biggest challenge we have is when we not read about the bicycle, not watch someone riding the bicycle, or someone who shares with you how to ride the bicycle. The biggest challenge is me learning how to ride the bicycle, if suppose I want to ride a bicycle. So by presenting those aspects in the book, what I'm trying to share is what happens when you're preparing for jnana, preparing for knowledge. How do you ensure that your mind is ready? And the greatest litmus test is when you relate with people and you relate with yourself. Right? Like, for example, I come home, my son comes to me and says, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with my homework?" And I say, "Go away, I'm doing my work." Now, that statement it's very loaded. It means so many things. Like, one particular implicit belief is my work is more important than my son's homework, isn't it? Right? Can you see that? So we don't bring that out, right? We don't bring that out, but that is the belief in me. My work is more important than my son's homework. So what I'm trying to do by presenting those aspects in this book as a very unique, it takes quite a number of pages in this book, is to show you how we actually may harbor beliefs, behaviors that may not help us in the preparation of the mind. Like, for example, racism. For example, looking at Vedanta as an academic pursuit. Now, all of these are not going to help. It will not help us, because that means we are again compartmentalizing. We're not integrating the two. So that's why I spent quite a lot of energy actually trying to present life situations where we can use it as a way to see how am I responding to these challenges. When someone disagrees with me, how do I respond? In a meeting, in an office, someone disagrees with my view. How do I respond? What is my emotion at that point? That emotional gauge can tell us so much about how the mind is ready and prepared for knowledge of the self, or Upanishad knowledge, or Vedanta. So that's the reason why I spent a lot of energy presenting those aspects, because that's what I meant. These aspects are not needed for the sannyasi. You see the point now. But these aspects are needed for the contemporary person who living in an urban life with people, working with people, relating with people.
That brings me to the next question, that is moksha a valid goal for people who are living in a family life or in the secular life, or is it only meant for sannyasis? As the texts have actually, the vision of the text is it's only meant for sannyasis. So is it valid for others to seek this knowledge?
So this, I cannot use my opinion. I have to appeal to the tradition here. All right, because it would be my own opinion if I responded to this. The only license that we have for people who are not sannyasis to that validates this pursuit is Vidyaranya Swami. Vidyaranya in Jivanmukta Viveka, he makes a very interesting point. He says that people who cannot take up sannyasa actually can also seek this knowledge if they had the right discipline. That means if they are disciplined in the way that we relate with the self and the world, etc., can actually also seek this knowledge. So to answer that question, yes, the tradition permits, sanctions people who are not sannyasis to also pursue this knowledge if they are not in a position to renounce the world. So that's a traditional response. Let me give you another response that is from an experience perspective, which is supported by Jabala Upanishad. Now, in the Jabala Upanishad, there is a very nice line. The moment that you feel dispassion, that is the moment you should leave home. It doesn't matter what stage of life you are in. You can leave your home at any point in time, right? At that moment, the dispassion occurs. So what does that tell us? The moment the desire comes up, the desire for moksha comes up, then that desire validates your pursuit. You see the point here? So this is a very important thing. When that desire to get out of this samsara here means that this cycle of, distress or suffering or dukkha, when we know that I want out of this, then that moment it gets validated. It is not validated because someone told you. That's why, in my life, in my early years, I used to bring friends to Vedanta classes and lectures. They come there, some of them fell asleep in the class. I remember right next to you, the guy is snoring and I have to wake him up, hey, wake up, because he's snoring so loudly in the lecture. Some people come and attend the class and then they don't want to come to the next lecture, which is right, the next day. So what does this tell us? The desire, the motivation is not there, because this is not what they want, which means in the technical language, these people are called anadhikaris. That doesn't make them any lower than the adhikari. I want to make that very clear. It only means that they are meant to follow pravritti dharma, which is the first two sadhanas of the text. The first two sadhanas of the text is the baseline for any person who wants to follow this dharma. The first two sadhanas are the baseline. So if they're not interested in attaining moksha, liberation, not interested to know Brahman, to know the self, then what should they do? Just stick to the first two sadhanas. Suppose after doing the first two sadhanas and then going into karma yoga, and then or before karma yoga, the desire for wanting to really live a spiritual life comes up, then you go into karma yoga. Or if you think that the desire for moksha comes up, you go into the second stage, which is karma yoga. That's third sadhana kicks in, and then that begins the process of mental preparation. So that's how it is. Yeah.
I think one of the questions which actually some people have asked is, what is the significance of the 40 practices? Is this just a number, or is there anything in Hinduism? Is there any importance of the number 40? We only know Hanuman Chalisa, that's the only Chalisa 40 we know. But is there any insight there that you can share?
There is no significance to the 40, to be honest. It may be, if Shankara was still around, we would have asked him why 40. But yeah, we don't know. But actually, you see, although it's 40 sadhanas, as what Nagaraj has mentioned, actually it's Panchakam, meaning 5 verses. So it's 5 times. So five verses presents 40. You get it now? So it is 8 sadhanas per verse, right? So that's why it becomes 40. So I don't know why that 40 is there. But one thing we know is half of them are focusing on how to embody the knowledge very, very beautifully. How do I assimilate this knowledge? That we know. So I don't have the answer to that because we don't know, but we know there are 5 verses and each verse gives 8 sadhanas. So 8 times 5 gives you 40.
Is there a reason why that assimilation has been given so much importance? What are the perils that typically sadhakas face? Is the text trying to address that?
I think so. I think Shankara is addressing that. You know why? Because a lot of times there is this particular you see, we need to understand what is the purpose of nididhyasana, right? Why is it focusing on embodiment, which is nididhyasana? So the purpose of nididhyasana is actually stated by a very Vidyaranya in his Anubhuti Prakasha text in the, I think, 12th, 13th century. In that text, he says, the purpose of nididhyasana is viparita bhavana nivritti. That means viparita bhavana. What is viparita bhavana? Viparita means opposing. Bhavana means tendencies. So after learning this knowledge, you may notice that there are there could be still tendencies that are opposing the knowledge. Let me give an example. When you know the self, you become a person who sees yourself. You see everyone as part of that same reality, Brahman. Okay, let's say. So that means when you meet the other person, you meet them quite differently from the way that you would have met before this knowledge. There could be kindness, there could be compassion, there could be respect. But you know what happens? Then you meet after learning this knowledge and being maybe appreciating this knowledge very well, and you meet someone and someone scolds you. And what happens? Immediately anger rises. Now, this anger that rises after knowing after being exposed to this knowledge is called an opposing tendency, viparita bhavana. So this is the biggest challenge for people who learn and study Vedanta, because they learn one thing, and then when they go home or go to office and meet people or anywhere else, they realize that knowledge doesn't transform into behaviors that are conducive. You see the point now? So the behaviors are now opposing. And why are the behaviors opposing? Because of past habits. These habitual tendencies stand in the way. Shankara talks about this in the Bhagavadpadacharya Upanishad. He mentions that even after knowing this knowledge, the person who knows this knowledge has to reflect, he says. Otherwise, these opposing tendencies sometimes can what I call derail you. In your life. Sometimes it may just derail you temporarily. Sometimes it may happen. So therefore, Shankara mentions that in the Bhagavadpadacharya Upanishad that after knowing, you need to recollect this knowledge and keep it, which is the purpose of nididhyasana. So what can we infer here is that by focusing so much of importance, half the text, focusing on this aspect tells us that we can actually overcome these opposing tendencies if we know what we need to do, isn't it? Which is what Nitinji was saying. If I know what to do, then I can oppose, these tendencies. So Shankara gives very beautiful, what I call instructions to actually overcome this. So one particular he says is Swatvannam natu vachatam. He says, may you not seek tasty food. Look at that very, very simple instruction. This is after knowledge, Do not seek tasty food. What does that mean? So he says, and then, so why? Because tasty food, if you seek tasty food, I'm saying if tasty food comes to your table is quite different. That is prarabdha karma, which is meant to be. But if you go hunting, for tasty food, it means that I have superimposed a value onto something other than the self. I've somehow empowered, which is also called adhyasa, right? It's a kind of superimposition that we make. So you see, things like that, sadhanas like that are actually taught by Shankara. Very, very simple, what I call sadhanas, 20 sadhanas he mentions to overcome these opposing tendencies, which is called viparita bhavana.
There's also one where he says that please don't go and argue or start debating with the people. What is especially I'm asking this question because in today's social media world, we are always arguing or putting across our points or debating. So is that a danger for seekers, to get unnecessarily caught in points of view?
Yes, he says, this is the text, this is the sadhana says, Buddha Janirvada Parityajyatam, he says. That means don't engage in argument with people, with the general people and also the intelligent people. He says, do not engage in that. Why? Because what Shankara is possibly getting at is that whenever we get into debates, actually there is a reason for the implicit motive is I want to be right. You see, but I could be wrong. So debate, you see, I used to be a debater in my secondary school, and I remember debating very well. I even won a prize for it, because it's not what I'm talking about, it's how I debate is the one that earned me the prize. So So debaters are very good at debating. They're not good at content, you see. So when Shankara makes this point about, do not debate with people, do not argue with people, because arguments, whenever we argue, it shows that there is some insecurity, isn't it? Right? The need to be right, the desire to be right all the time. Everyone else, need to be wrong and I need to be right. What does that tell us? It only points out a very inadequacy and insecurity that is within us. So when we continue debating without listening and not knowing when to withdraw from a discussion, we actually perpetuate the ego, which is right, like Sureshwara says very interestingly. I remember in one text, he says, the last challenge for a sadhaka is that ahankara. He says, because the ahankara, the ego, would want to manifest in many different ways and finds its way out to when it relates with the world, and it wants to show its presence. And this transforms the crevices and the gaps through which it manifests itself is insecurity, right? Inadequacy. It'll come up. That's why in the last stage, Shankara advises us, don't engage in debates. Don't argue, unnecessarily. You see, that's why Vada, Jalpa, there are different types of discussion. It's different from Samvada. In the Vedanta tradition, they encourage Samvada. Samvada means it is an enquiry for the purpose of truth. That kind of discussions are very helpful. But if I'm trying to establish that I am right and you are wrong, and no, I want to find fault in what you are saying, that is never going to lead us into, it is never going to allow us to embody the knowledge that we value and we are seeking.
My next question is pertaining to what you have called appendix, but really it's the third part of the book, which is the explanation and commentaries on the key verses of the principal Upanishads. How did you go about choosing them, and what is the purpose of including these verses in this text? Because Sadhana-Pachakam itself seems to be a complete text, but in addition to that, you have also taken these verses from the Upanishad.
So the reason why I did that is because of the there is this particular sadhana, which is sadhana 16, which is called Shruti Shiro Vakyam Samakarnyatam. Now, Shruti Shiro Vakyam Samakarnyatam means may you listen to the Upanishad's words attentively. So, you see, at the 16th sadhana, the text instructs the sadhaka to listen to the teachings of the Upanishad. If that person doesn't listen, the 70th sadhana would not work. You see the point now? Because it's linear, as I said, it's linear, it's successive, right? It's a pedagogy, is successive and it's linear. So at the 16th sadhana, which says that you listen to the Upanishad from a teacher, from a guru, you listen to that. So I wanted to satisfy that curiosity of the reader. So, maybe when you're reading this text, you may not have encountered a teacher or may not found a teacher, or you have no access to a teacher. So at least by looking at the Upanishads, the selected verses, you at least get a flavor of what the Upanishads are teaching. So at least you can satisfy that curiosity. I always say this to people who want to learn. Don't go to bed with questions unanswered. It actually stays in your head and it doesn't help you because you have that question in your head. So to satisfy that particular curiosity or the gap, I've given quite many verses from the Mukhya Upanishads, the principal Upanishads and the appendix, so that the person can now stop reading the Sadhana Panchakam at the 16th sadhana, go to the appendix, read all the Upanishad brief commentary. It's not exhaustive commentary, just brief commentary. No is not a substitute for not learning from a teacher. After reading all of that, come back to the Sadhana Panchakam and resume from the 17th sadhana. That is the purpose of including it, so that the text now becomes more supportive to the reader instead of just writing a commentary on the 40 sadhanas.
We've been given some additional time, so we can ask you some more questions. One of the questions is that, as you said, that the guru plays a crucial role. How does one go about finding a guru? Is it just that we just pray that we get a guru, or do we look out for something, or do we just test whatever is there in the market and then decide that this is what is suiting me, or how does this whole process work?
So the traditional response to this, or very often heard, is you don't look for the teacher, let the teacher appear. So when you're ready, the teacher would appear. So the key point is, when you're ready, the teacher would appear. When you're ready, when you're not ready and the teacher appears, that is not your teacher. That is not the right teacher, to be honest. You end up, when you're not ready and you follow any teacher, you probably it is likely that you may be following or learning from someone who may not be what we call as a Sat Vidvan. This text uses the word Sat Vidvan. It's not just a Vidvan, Sat Vidvan. All right, a very important compound here. So the response to this is actually the same. I would adhere to the same point, which is, we don't look for the teacher. If you look for the teacher, normally you are looking, when you're looking, you may settle for anything that is what you call lesser than what you're expecting, right? After some time you get tired, you settle for any teacher. And then that teacher may not answer your question, and then you give up on this pursuit. So I always tell people that who are looking for teachers, instead of looking for teacher, just prepare yourself. Just work on preparing yourself. So that is why you can see 13th sadhana is to seek a teacher, right? Which says Satvidvan Upasripyatam. So until the 12th sadhana, you can continue doing it. The 12 sadhanas are pretty heavy, to be honest. It's enough for you, to actually keep you occupied. And I want to stress one important point. There is one sadhana, which is number 9, the 9th sadhana, which says Sangha Satsu Vidiyatam. Sangha Satsu Vidiyatam means, may you resort to Satsanga. Satsanga means it's basically a gathering of like-minded people who are talking about the same topic, which is the whole idea about Sat, which is truth or any discipline of knowledge. So that is a very important component, in my opinion, and I benefited a lot. The discussion, the open discussion with like-minded people can be very, very helpful in trying to understand what is available in the spiritual, field of the times, and also understand who the teachers are. What does this teacher say? Are they, teaching according to the tradition? You see, we get to actually overcome a very big obstacle, which we never think about. Whether the teacher is a good teacher, I don't believe there's a good teacher. I only know effective teachers. Is either teacher is effective or ineffective. Good, bad is very subjective, because, I don't like the way he walks. Bad teacher will automatically conclude. But a good teacher, technically means an effective teacher. Is either teacher is effective or ineffective. So effective teachers, to understand, you must have had some prior discussions and deliberation. So that's why satsanga is very powerful. Attending satsanga, attending lectures, hanging out with people who have the similar goal, which is, moksha, or even, shastra vichara, meaning inquiring into the scriptures, texts, Upanishads. Such what I call engagements can be very, very, very helpful. So before even seeking a teacher, I would say, look at these 12 sadhanas and start, engaging yourself in these 12 sadhanas. Then you think about the teacher, then, you don't have to then worry. Vivek Chodamani says, it's very, very lucky to actually to get the contact, to come into contact with the teacher. That luckiness or this rarity only means one thing, that you have gained a lot of merit. And how do you gain this merit? Doing all the 12 sadhanas leads you to generate this merit to meet this teacher.
One of the questions is, which you yourself pointed out, you said that when you read the book, studied the text at a later stage, you had other insights. So one of the questions that the participant has asked is, when you write books on Vedanta, how does it transform you? What are the new kind of insights you see? Can you share that experience with the viewers? Yeah,
writing any commentary on any text is almost like nididhyasana, to be honest, because you are dwelling on that knowledge. It's like teaching, as I said. When I teach a text, it's like nididhyasana for me. It's like, because I am actually soaking myself in that knowledge, and I need to write it from that perspective. And I am particularly not a fan of scholarly writing, which means that I subscribe to the point that there are 2 doors that need to be opened when studying Vedanta texts. The first door that needs to be opened is the opening the door to the text, because the text is the means. Opening the door to the text, and this is where the Shrotriyas, those of you who know what this term means, you would understand. It's basically a Shrotriya who knows the traditional method. So the Shrotriyas are very good at this. They open the door to the text. But there is a second door that needs to be opened. The second door that needs to be all open is to open the door. After you open the door to the text, you open a second door to the self, which is to teach the text so that you know the self, not teach the text for you to understand the text. Then it remains as a concept, right? Like, that's why I've met some professors from universities who are great, brilliant scholars of Shankara's commentaries, of Upanishads, and to just so that they do not subscribe to it as a faith subscription. They do not practice any of the teachings, but they can share with me which verses can be found where, and they can tell me exactly what these verses means, etc. But they have not understood. They are not what I call assimilated the knowledge. Can you see that? So some people are very good at opening the door to the text, but opening the second door, which is using the text to let you see the self. Now, that is a very important thing, especially for me. So when I write or when I talk, I'm interested in that second door as well, not just the first door. First door is important. And I think there are many people who do the first door very, very well. I've seen so many teachers right now in the YouTube who do a great job, so many great Shrotriyas who do a fantastic job. I look up to them. But my interest is the second door. It's very important that we open the first door and we also enable the possibility of opening the second door using the text like a mirror to show you who you are. And that's where that's the kind of writing that I engage in. I want to show anyone, what is this text for?
The next question is, how do seekers figure out that they are making progress, they are on the right path, or is it again left up to the guru to guide them?
You see, this question is, if the person is a sannyasi, the guru can guide, because every day you are antevasi, you are with the teacher. The teacher every day morning sees your face, goes to bed also looking at your face. After looking at your face, he can give you all the feedback. In the modern world like today, you come once a week class for 1 hour or 2 hours. The rest of the time you are doing your stuff on your own. How do you know you're making progress? How does the teacher know that you're making progress? How do you know that you're making progress? Because you could be biased, isn't it? Right? You can even argue yourself. We are very good. The mind can really make the tarka. Shankara says, the tarkikas, the nayayikas, it means the logicians. They are very good because why? They can logically analyze in any way they want. And our mind is very good at that. We will do something wrong and justify it. So how do we know that? That is why it is very important for us to always be very objective when we think about our own progress. And how do we know? Shastra is the mirror. When we don't have access to the guru, then we need to ensure that we are making progress by using the Shastra as a gauge. Like, for example, the Asuri Sampati in the Gita, which talks about demonic qualities, in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, that kind of chapters can be very helpful in case we get derailed. And then, we see these kind of, what I call behaviors manifesting. Then I know actually I've been derailed. Then look at the Devi Sampati, which is the qualities of Devas. If you manifest those qualities of the Devas, which is also in the Bhagavad Gita, then we know that we are heading the right direction. So in this answer is for the people like us, maybe you are not sannyasis, who have access, do not have 24-hour access to a teacher. We use the Shastra as a guide.
Can you share with us what are you planning to write next, or what are you currently writing in terms of Advaita Vedanta?
So the next book that I'm currently working on is to really see I use the word spiritual market because I'm very conscious and deliberately using this word. Because today's spirituality also can be seen as a market, because everyone could be selling something, everyone could be presenting something, and we are like buyers. We buy this. So, and many people use the word moksha very loosely. Mukti, moksha, nirvana, kaivalya, etc. All of these words are synonyms for moksha or liberation, and they use it very loosely. But what does it mean? So one person says, you sing what you call bhajans and then you can get mukti. Another person may say you meditate and then you can get mukti. Is that the case? Shankara says no. All of this cannot lead you to moksha. He's very emphatic and very clear. So how can we understand that properly? In a way, not in a dogmatic way, not in a way that it is because someone says it, a teacher says it, but rather in a very reasoned out way. So my next book is about that. How do we understand what is moksha and how do you attain it in the whole tradition that has been organized by Adi Shankara? I use the word organized because he was not the one who started this, right? It goes back. That's how I say Sadashiva Samarambham. It goes back to the Adi, the Purusha itself, Ishvara. So Shankara has organized it for us. So the next book is to bring that, to look at all of Shankara's works and bring to the forefront in a very concise and a very organized way. What is moksha and how can you attain it? In that sense, in what the tradition says. That's my next book that I'm working on.
You mentioned that, writing these commentaries is also a form of nididhyasana. And I'm asking this for people who may be interested in writing on this subject. What would you advise them? I mean, if somebody is interested in writing about Advaita Vedanta, what would you advise them?
I would not even venture to advise anything. I don't think I'm in a position to advise anyone, any author, how to write, what to write, and, what you should not do, what you should do. I don't think so. I'm also learning, writing. And every time I write, it gets better. Every time I think, something new comes. So I don't think I'm in a position to advise. And anyway, I'm not a fan of giving advice to start with. So I have no advice to anyone, right? That's the only thing I would say. But, if the only thing that requires, even before any kind of writing, is not the subject. The subject of the book is this subject. This subject. This first person, I, aham, this subject is very important. I think that is the most important subject, even before embarking on any other book. By no means this is an advice. This is my perspective here.
Knowledge is the main means to attain liberation. But in recent times, we has the tradition underplayed the value of prayer, underplayed the value of meditation in the attainment of this knowledge, or are those not required really?
No, all of that are required. And of course, this response from me is coming from my limited exposure, because it's impossible for me to be exposed to everything that's happening in the world. All right. I get to know more things because of internet and YouTube and all of that. But from my limited experience, I realize meditation has been underplayed. There was a time meditation was overplayed. All right. Because people thought that to attain moksha, you need to meditate. So therefore, that was really overplayed. But actually, according to the Upanishads and Adi Shankara, meditation is not the means to moksha. So there came a point where a pivot, it came where we completely got the opportunity to look at what is this knowledge, which has got nothing to do with meditation and even, prayers, which is called dharma, all right, or vidhi, etc., vidhis. So in that process, maybe we had downplayed the value of meditation, so that people can direct their attention to what the Upanishads and, the Vedanta tradition has been saying. So in the process, we could have possibly downplayed it, but I think it's important that we understand that in the sadhana chatushtaya, in the fourfold qualifications, which is presented in Vedanta, the third one, which is called Shatka Sampatti, which is a sixfold accomplishments, which I've also written in the Sadhana Panchakam book as well, quite elaborately. You see, most of the Shatka Sampatti accomplishments can be easily accomplished through meditation. Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, etc. All of that can be easily accomplished if someone is a meditator, in whatever form of meditation. Today, there is a very famous form of meditation called mindfulness, which I'm also in that industry as well. So the mindfulness which is taught in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad traditions, and even in the Mahabharata, especially Sanat Sujatiyam, these practices can be very, very helpful to cultivate the Shatka Sampatti. Not all the 6, but especially 5 of them can be very, very helpful. So that has been perhaps downplayed. There is a lot of Ishvara, what I call Pujanam, which is very much there. And there is a lot of jnana, but meditation somehow has taken a dip. Not that it's vanished, taken a dip in the Vedanta tradition. I'm only talking about Vedanta tradition. And again, I'm qualifying from my limited exposure. This is what I'm noticing. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned mindfulness, because I was going to ask you, what is the connection? Is there any link between Advaita Vedanta and mindfulness? Are the practices, do they converge? What is it? Because we always thought of mindfulness as like a Buddhist practice or some secular practice,
So the word mindfulness has to be understood properly, because it's a modern word that has been invented by someone, about 200 years ago. for a particular type of practice. So mindfulness exists in the Buddhist tradition, etc. It exists in all religious traditions, to be honest. It also exists in the Hindu tradition as well. You can find it in the Bhagavad Gita. The term apramatta comes in the Sanat Sujatiyam. You see apramada. The term, all of these terms refer to mindfulness, which is a kind of alertness or vigilance that is cultivated in the person's being. So yes, that is what is called mindfulness. But in the modern society today, what we are seeing is actually a different type of mindfulness called secular mindfulness. Now, secular mindfulness is not for the purpose of moksha. Let's be very clear. Secular mindfulness is for the purpose of wellness. You know, it helps people with depression, helps people with anxiety, also helps people to discover more meaning and purpose. So it is a very secular, laukika approach, you know, to meditation. But the spiritual forms of mindfulness, if we perform it, practice it consciously, can be very helpful in the purification, in the preparation phase for moksha.
Thank you so much. Any closing remarks you'd like to make on this topic or the book or anything that you'd like to share with your readers?
No, nothing of that sort. But I'm thinking that you know, we all read something because we want answers. You know, so when we have if the question happens to be, how can I follow conscious and deliberate, you know, set of instructions, you know, so that I can attain liberation or at least appreciate it, then of course sadhana panchakam is a very good start. In my view, you can consider, you know, reading the sadhana panchakam. There are also perhaps other commentaries available. I'm not going to say my commentary is the best. Okay, so the text sadhana panchakam is a very good text to start with, so you can read other commentaries, etc. But this certainly sadhana panchakam is a good place to start.
If anybody wants to contact you with regard to either knowing about the subject or about the book, is there any website they can reach out to you at, or email? Is that something you would like to share?
Yeah, you can just Google my name. You may find some of the professional spaces that I'm part of, and that is, you can find any space there. I'm also on LinkedIn, right? You can just drop me a mail, drop me a note. I may not respond immediately, but I will certainly respond. Yeah.
Do you hold any classes, online classes or physical classes in Singapore for seekers, or?
No, not really. I'm not a fan. I'm reducing group classes. Not that I'm averse to it, but I focus on people, like I focus on one-on-one, you know, conversations rather. Like I said, I don't see myself as a teacher. I see myself as just walking with someone who wants to know this knowledge. So I'll walk with people that who also find me. And there's a niyati, you know, Ishvara niyati. We don't look for people. People sometimes come into our lives and they want to learn, and sometimes it's through a conversation. That's how I have been supporting people. I don't want to presume that I'm teaching anyone in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathirasan ji, for sharing your views. Many viewers have asked where they can find this book. It's available on Padhega India, which is in India, and on Amazon India. You can buy on both these platforms. You can buy the book. And thank you so much, viewers, for listening in.
Perhaps you could
we have many programs.
Link to the book in the chat box for viewers. Yeah.
Sorry, the book, I'll just again highlight the book.
No, can you share the link? Can you share the link to the book in the chat box?
Link, okay.
Yeah, you can share an Amazon link or a Padhega India link in the chat box.
Okay, let me just reply here. Answer live, okay.
No, you just share it in the chat box, please.
Okay.
So it will go to all the viewers. Yeah.
Okay. So they are good. Okay, yes. Okay, we have many more sessions coming up with part of the Global Festival of Oneness. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. India time, we have Dr. K.S. Maheshwaran. Okay, let the flyer come. Yes. Dr. Nambudri will be talking to us about birth and death as enunciated in Vedanta. This is a talk in Sanskrit. So please do tune in and hear the words of wisdom. I'll conclude the session with a closing prayers. सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु, सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।